It all started many years ago. I had graduated college and began my new job at the firm. I was super stressed, trying to work my way up and earn my spot in the company. Although my apartment was a shabby little one bed, I took pride because this small place was my own. One night, I was in the shower pondering the day's events while shampooing my hair. I was enjoying the scalp scrub when, through the curtain, I saw the shadow of a dog walk by the tub. At first, I thought nothing of it and continued scrubbing my scalp. My mom's dog, Baron, always seemed to wander his way into my bathroom to sniff around. I rinsed my head when the realization hit me. My heart immediately dropped to my stomach. I wasn't in my parents' house. I was in my own tiny apartment. And I definitely did not own a dog. I never saw or heard a dog come in, and the way it walked by, it was almost as if it were familiar with this house. I was so afraid to even think about what could be sitting on the other side of the open bathroom door. I stood frozen in the shower, staring at the curtain, the water hitting my back. Surely I was just seeing things, right? I tried to convince myself of that. But then I remembered. I had heard the dog's nails clicking against the tiled floor. I've heard of your mind playing tricks on you, but is it capable of manifesting a visual and audible being? I wasn't sure what to do as the water ran cold. Reluctantly, I turned the water off and just stood there, trying to hype myself up to open the damn curtain. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I remained as quiet as possible, although I knew that whatever was out there knew someone was in here. But why would they wait until I got out of the shower? Why wouldn't they just attack upon realization that someone was in here? I lived in a pleasant area of town, but break-ins happen now and then. I usually kept most of the lights off to conserve energy. What if they thought nobody was home? So they broke in and realized I was in here. But if that was the case, what were they waiting for? Did the fact that they realized I was in here scare them off? I didn't know. But I did know I couldn't stand in that tub forever. I stood there, silent, waiting to hear something, anything. After several more moments of just standing there, I decided that now was the time. I lifted my hand and slowly reached for the curtain. My breathing became heavy as my hand got closer and closer. In one instance, I ripped back the curtain, and at that very moment, my phone rang. The loud ringtone made my heart skip a beat. I laughed to myself at the thought I was acting scared as a little boy, stepped out of the tub, and answered the phone. Jason? It was my dad, and he didn't sound happy. Dad? Was my reply, a sudden sense of dread passing over my body. It, it's your mother, he stammered and sobbed uncontrollably. I hurriedly dressed and went to my parents' house. Turns out my mother had a heart condition that nobody but her was aware of. She had found out a long time ago at a doctor's appointment and knew that her prognosis wasn't good. So, she continued living life as if she had never heard the truth and hid every bit of it from us. My dad returned home from work that day and found her slumped over the kitchen sink, where she had apparently been preparing the evening's dinner. With all the craziness going on and the hustle of preparing my mother's funeral, I all but forgot about what I saw in the shower that night. That was until it happened again. Time passed after my mother's death, and life continued on as usual. I really dug into my work to help keep my mind off of my mom, usually working late into the evening after everyone was gone. My office was small and cramped, but had a window with a pleasant view. Our firm took up the entire 18th floor of a 20-story building. Some days, I would stare out the window at the park across the street. My thoughts would wander as I thought about this and that, trying to make sense of the world. One particular evening, I was sitting at my desk working when I heard a door close. I looked up toward the hallway and noticed how dark the building was. The lights of all the offices around mine were off. My office was dimly lit, as I preferred to work in a lower light setting, so the brightly lit hallway was a stark contrast. I looked out the window and saw the sunset, and it was almost gone. I checked my watch. 8:30? I didn't even remember anyone saying goodbye or even hearing anyone clear out of the building. Was I concentrating that hard? The door I heard close must have been the cleaning crew leaving. I hadn't even heard their vacuums or anything. Brushing off my inattentiveness, I decided it had been a long time since I had had a break, so I pushed back my chair and walked to the window. The remains of the sunset were beautiful. I watched as the cars moved around on the streets and faint outlines of joggers on the park trails. As the sun set even more and the street lights flickered, I continued scanning the city below and caught my reflection in the window. I noticed my face, looking a little older, and wondered if I should calm down a little at work before I ended up looking like my grandpa in my 30s. As I scanned my face, a bit of movement behind me startled me. I immediately focused on the open door, and there it was, like a Rottweiler on steroids. The stout black figure stood at my open office door, staring directly at me. Not just at the back of my head, though. It was looking directly at my reflection. I jumped back, startled as hell to see a dog on the 18th floor of a closed office building. I snapped my head around to see his tail as it walked toward the entrance. I heard his collar jingling and nails on the floor. I couldn't bring myself to move from my spot. My mind tried to make sense of what I had just seen. I couldn't make out all of his features, just his eyes, deep and yellow, glowing almost as bright as the hallway light. I stood there, shocked, trying to decide my next move. I no longer heard the creature, but terrified, I also didn't want to check and see if it left. The silence of the building made the hairs on my arm stand up. I decided I was going to run and close the door and just spend the rest of the night inside my office. I sprinted for the door and slammed it shut. This was going to be a long night. After several hours of slight panic, I settled in under my desk, using my suit jacket as a pillow. I turned Netflix on my phone to drown out any noises and eventually drifted off to sleep. The sound of my desk phone ringing woke me up the next morning. I crawled out from under my desk and heard the normal hustling and bustling of the office. I breathed a sigh of relief. I had survived the night. I wondered how the dog slipped by everybody, though. I opened my office door and almost ran into Angela, Mr. Macon's secretary. Her eyes were puffy and red, and she held a tissue under her sniffling nose. "Jason," she said, startled. "I didn't even see you come in this morning." "Yeah, I kind of snuck in," I played it off. "Are you okay?" "You didn't hear?" She lowered the tissue from her nose and gave me a confused look. I shook my head, trying to glean some information from her. "Mr. Macon died last night in a car wreck." "What?" I asked, shocked. "Oh my gosh." "Yes," she said, blowing her nose. "I'm surprised you didn't see it on the news last night. He'd been drinking and... She stopped for a moment as a few tears rolled down her cheeks. "And?" I urged her on. "And they said around 8:40 he ran his car off the road and into a tree. He died on impact." 8:40? I asked hesitantly. Angela nodded her head. "He was leaving a dinner meeting with some new clients he was trying to snatch up. They must have had way too much to drink," she sobbed. 8:40? I whispered. The realization hit me. I remembered, last night, looking down at my watch and catching the time. 8:30. The dog. I saw that damn glowing-eyed demon not too long after that. It couldn't have been any longer than 10 minutes or so, could it? I shook my head in disbelief. The color must have disappeared from my face instantly. Thankfully, Angela just chalked it up to the news she had just laid on me. I'm so sorry, Jason. If you need to take some time off, everyone will understand. We know you really looked up to him. I nodded, still in a daze from my comprehension of the situation last night. She sniffled, gave me a swift hug, and hurriedly retreated to her office. I stood in place, not knowing what to make of this information. This couldn't be a coincidence, could it? The rest of that day was a kind of blur. I left my office and hung around the very park I was gazing at when Mr. Macon had wrecked his car. That damn dog consumed my thoughts. It wasn't until I returned home and prepared to take a shower when I remembered the silhouette of the dog the night my mom had died. Was that the same dog? I was suddenly afraid to take a shower. The next couple of years, I lived in complete and total fear of seeing that dog again. I even went to a therapist who said the dog was most likely just a manifestation of my internal stress. At first, I didn't like the fact that she was trying to just explain it away, making it sound as if I was mentally ill. But I eventually settled into the thought. I mean, I was under an immense amount of stress both times I had seen the dog. Maybe the timing of the sightings was just coincidental to the deaths of my boss and mother. I finally got to where the dog consumed my thoughts less and less, and I could carry on life as normal. I had made partner in my firm in the meantime, which consumed me with work as usual. Then, I met her. Sarah was rushing out of a local coffee shop one morning, late for work as usual. She was looking behind her, saying goodbye to the barista she had grown a small relationship with, due to the fact that she was there practically every morning. She slammed right into me, iced coffee splashing everywhere. I looked down at the half of a bagel stuck to my suit jacket by the strawberry cream cheese. After tons of apologies and my insistence on buying her a new breakfast, we exchanged numbers and had been pretty much inseparable since then. We took things slowly, but did almost everything short of moving in together at first. One morning, after waking up next to her beautiful face, I ran to grab her favorite breakfast from the very coffee shop we met at. Heading out of the door, I turned around to say goodbye to the barista, just as she had that morning we met. Smiling, I turned back around. The smile immediately wiped from my face. Sitting quietly, next to a bench where a homeless man slept, he was staring at me intensely. My arms instantly felt weak. I closed my eyes and shook my head. For a moment, I thought I was seeing things. I mean, work had me stressed out. Like my therapist said, this was just a manifestation of all the work laid in my lap. I opened my eyes, expecting him not to be there any longer. To my dismay, he was still there. My stress couldn't be that high, could it? No. That couldn't be him, I thought. It had to be the homeless man's dog, and I was just making it out to be that damn dog. But then again, what normal dog's eyes glow bright against the broad daylight? I felt frozen in place, as if it glued my feet to the floor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The dog, expressionless, stood up and turned to walk down the street. It took me several minutes to come to and realize he was headed toward my house. "Sarah!" I said out loud, startling the passers-by. I dropped the coffee and bagel and began sprinting home. The dog ran, and my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. The dog's speed increased to a supernatural speed, and I lost sight of him. I plodded as fast as I could down the street, my thoughts racing. I just wanted to get to her, to make sure everything was okay. I made it home after running for what felt like hours. I busted through the door, my breath heavy. I was so afraid of what I was going to find. I reluctantly walked toward the bedroom. I slowly opened the door, preparing myself for what I was about to see. "Jason?" Sarah's voice came from behind me. "What are you doing?" She giggled with a concerned look on her face. I didn't answer her. I just walked over to her, embraced her tightly, and sobbed. She hugged me back, cautiously, until I could gain control of myself. She pulled back from me to look me in my face. "What's wrong, honey?" Her caring eyes peered lovingly into mine. I didn't have the heart to tell her about what I had seen, or rather, what I had been seeing for years. So, I lied to her. I left to get you breakfast. I saw a fire truck speeding down the street, and it turned on our block. I don't know why. It's silly, but I got a bad feeling and ran home to make sure you were okay. "Oh, honey," she replied and hugged me tightly around my neck. "I love you so much." I was just so glad that she was okay. I felt stupid for assuming that dog was about her. Oh shit. The dog. Seeing Sarah's face alive had completely distracted me from the entire point. I didn't think she was alive. Panic settled back in as I realized if the dog wasn't for Sarah, then at that moment, the phone rang. It was my Uncle Joe calling to tell me he and my father had gone for a walk as they usually did, pretty much every morning. They went across the street, and a car ran the red light, striking my father just a few moments ago. He was being rushed to the hospital as we were speaking. My hands went numb, and I dropped the phone as my uncle was still talking. Now, I was 100% positive that the dog meant death. I don't understand why I'm able to see him, or why he shows himself to me, but I know I'm never prepared to see him. And even as the years have gone on, every time I've seen him since has done nothing but send me into sheer panic. The only unfortunate thoughts I deal with now, aside from that horrid creature, is the fact that my parents never got to meet my wife, Sarah, or our children. I remember it like it was yesterday. The night before my dad died, I asked my then girlfriend if she would have dinner with me and my dad. I felt it was time to take that step. She had agreed without hesitation. That has haunted me ever since. And so has that death creature. I'd seen him only a couple more times since my father died. Once for my Uncle Joe, and the other for my wife's sister. I now realize that this thing only shows me when someone around me is going to die. I just never know who it is. And now that I have kids, I don't want to know. I hate that he shows me. Knowing right before someone's going to die doesn't help me to stop it, especially when I don't even know who the hell it is. And why is it a dog? These questions have plagued me greatly over the past 7 years. 7 years. That's the last time I'd seen him. It took me the first 4 to finally let my guard down and allow my kids to live a fairly normal life. I mean, I can't protect them from everything, right? I just don't know what I would do if I saw him, and it was for one of my children. It was when I got the call from my Aunt Karen about my grandma on my dad's side of the family that I finally felt relief. My grandma had died that afternoon from a heart attack. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't seen the dog, I was close with my grandmother, so there was no way that dog would have missed this. I kind of began feeling like it enjoyed showing itself to me, like it was bragging about knowing who and when, as if my lack of knowledge and panic fed his ego. I despised that thing. And it wasn't shy about presenting himself either. After that second time, he would ensure that I saw every bit of him every single time. So, where the hell was he now? Was I cured? Did it die? What the hell was it even? Was it just my mind playing tricks? Either way, his showings had stopped, and I finally felt like I could relax for the first time in so many years. Sure, a few others around us died, but the beast failed to show either time, even recently. If there is anything the dog taught me, it was to not allow fear to run my life. After I knew for sure he was gone, I realized that life was worth living to the fullest every day and not worrying about who's gonna die and when all the time. So I spent every single bit of my free time with my family I love so much. This has improved my life in so many ways. I feel like I have to get the word out. And that's exactly why I'm sitting down to write this to you. So you can learn from my story that you can't spend your entire life walking around in fear, or you will miss out on so much. I need to wrap this up though, as my family is in the other room watching a movie. The night is winding down and I have to get prepared to put my kids to bed. We're having a minor struggle with bedtime lately. My youngest son, Elijah, will be out like a light in 10 minutes after I put him to bed. It's my daughter, Ellie, that we've been having trouble with. I'm sure it's nothing that any normal 8-year-old hasn't gone through. You know, nightmares, seeing monsters in her room and on the street. We've taken her to a counselor who thinks the monsters she's seeing are just a manifestation of the stress she has at school. She tells me all the time about the monster she sees. She doesn't see it all the time. It just randomly pops up. She says he's big and black with glowing eyes. The last time she saw it was, well, a while back. It was right before Aunt Karen died. Anyway, I have to go now. Ellie's crying now because she said that she just saw the monster in the hallway. So I need to... Jason?